Okay, let's jump right into this. Welcome to today's Explainer. So, we are going to unpack a genuinely fascinating framework today. We're looking at a collection of texts that contrast our raw biological reality with modern societal conditioning. The whole core premise here is about reclaiming what the authors call the primal edge. It's a deep dive into how we operate on a fundamental biological level, what they call our hardware, versus all the social rules and politeness we are taught from birth, which they call our software. If you've ever felt this weird disconnect between what society tells you to do and what actually commands respect in the real world, well, this breakdown offers a highly provocative look at human behavior. And the foundation of this entire framework can really be summed up in this stark claim from the texts. The civilized world is a farm. You have been acting like a polite sheep. Break the fence. Wow, right? It's a visceral, totally unapologetic quote straight from the source material, and it immediately hooks us into the core problem these texts are trying to identify. The authors basically argue that modern society actively pressures men into losing their edge. It conditions us to be overly apologetic, highly passive, and just absolutely desperate to avoid conflict. But according to this framework, when you surrender to that pressure, you just become easily overlooked. You lose your natural dominance and your ability to inspire genuine respect. So, the sources map out this stark dichotomy between the civilized software we are taught and the primal hardware that actually governs human survival. The text suggests that, your rational brain is really just a passenger, while the driver of your behavior is something much, much older. On one side, we have social software, things like equality, the need to constantly explain yourself, passivity, and politeness. But then on the flip side, we see the biological hardware, territory, dominance, decisive action, and raw impulses. The authors argue that to truly succeed, you literally have to stop negotiating with reality through the lens of social theory and start operating directly from this biological hardware. Okay, let's dive into the specifics here. The sources claim that reclaiming your biological edge requires tapping into these 10 primal instincts. You can see them listed out here. Rather than playing social games, these instincts focus on raw energy, spanning from physical boundaries and dominant body language to prioritizing your own goals and leading with unapologetic action. Now, we definitely don't have time to cover all 10 today, but let's deep dive into a few of the most critical ones right now so we can understand exactly what the authors mean. Let's start with the very first instinct, confidence in chaos. The sources define this as remaining calm, decisive, and entirely grounded when under pressure. It's about setting firm boundaries against disrespect. You see, in the primal hardware, there's no such thing as maybe. Something either nurtures you or it threatens you. According to the authors, when things go sideways, a primal man doesn't crumble or panic. He remains completely unshakable. And crucially, he says no quickly and strongly. Being this calm eye of the storm is said to signal deep biological security to everyone around him. Now, this emotional control directly feeds into the third instinct, controlled aggression. The sources make a really important distinction here. They argue that true sovereignty isn't about being some wild, uncontrolled savage. Humans actually have low reactive aggression, like, losing our temper and yelling, but very high proactive, planned aggression. So erratic emotional outbursts actually signal weakness and insecurity. True primal power in this framework is possessing a cold, calculated capacity for danger that is strictly controlled. It's the ability to protect what is yours and act decisively without hesitation. It's the sword kept in the sheath, but always sharp. And that brings us to the 10th instinct, powerful stillness. This is all about embracing a calm, confident physical presence. The texts point out that fidgeting, pacing, or exhibiting nervous energy are dead giveaways of insecurity. They basically broadcast that you are seeking external validation. Powerful stillness, on the other hand, draws people in. It commands a room because it demonstrates that you don't need to actively seek attention to know you already have it. You are simply present, and that presence has weight. And the texts argue that this stillness isn't just a psychological trick. It's hardwired biology. Your physical posture directly alters your brain chemistry. According to the source material, if you slouch or shrink yourself down, your primordial brain assumes you've lost, dropping your serotonin and making you anxious. But if you take up space, if you stand tall and own your territory, your biology literally floods with the chemistry of a winner, serotonin and testosterone. Your body is your first and most important statement of power in this framework. So this biological reality drastically changes how we communicate. The sources contrast modern cheap talk with evolutionary costly signaling. In civilization, people use cheap talk, words, apologies, constant arguing, and explaining. I mean, anyone can say, "I am strong." But in biology, the authors argue that only costly signaling commands respect. This requires real biological expenditure, taking action, holding a dominant posture, risking failure, or being willing to walk away entirely. The text used the example of a peacock. It doesn't just say it's healthy, it displays a heavy, energy-draining tail. Your actions are your costly signals. And that leads to one of the most striking directives in this text. Talk with your back. The source material argues that constantly explaining yourself is essentially a form of submission. It's basically asking for permission or approval. According to the framework, if a situation or a person disrespects your boundaries, the absolute ultimate display of power is simply withdrawing your attention and walking away. It communicates on a primal level, I do not need you to survive. That withdrawal, that silence, is presented as the strongest possible demonstration of true abundance. All right, so all of these physical and behavioral shifts build toward the absolute climax of this philosophy, absolute result independence. Embodying this sovereign mindset requires completely detaching from the modern world's ultimate addiction. To truly operate on the primal hardware, the texts argue you absolutely have to master this specific mindset. Let's look at exactly how the sources define it. Absolute result independence is defined as executing your standard without lust for the result, entirely detached from external validation. The texts describe external validation, the applause of the crowd, the likes on social media, the approval of peers, as a drug more dangerous than cocaine. They argue it destroys your identity and turns you into a smiling slave. In this framework, true power and primal sovereignty lie in committing to your standard and your actions, regardless of how the crowd reacts. You act because it is who you are, not to get a specific reaction out of people. The texts illustrate this sovereign mindset with a massive cosmic metaphor. The sun does not seek the planet's applause for shining. It shines because its atomic core is burning. I mean, what a line. The authors are urging readers to become a nation of one. You don't perform to warm up the planets around you just so they will like you. You generate your own power, your own heat, based on your own internal atomic core. If people are drawn into your orbit, that is simply described as a byproduct of your undeniable presence, not the goal of your existence. So the crucial point is this final question, which we will leave you to think about today. Are you operating for the applause of the crowd, or are you dictating your own reality? Are you running on the polite, apologetic software installed by modern society? Or are you ready to tap into the unshakable primal hardware that has driven human dominance for millennia? The sources argue that reclaiming this primal edge is the absolutely only way to truly break the fence. Thanks so much for joining us for this explainer, and we'll see you next time.